go ahead and get started. If more people join, that's wonderful. My name is Jacqueline. I am so glad that all of you are here, both in person and virtually. I'll start by introducing myself. But like I said, my name is Jackie. I work for the health department. I'm in the local office in St. Albans. I do emergency preparedness work. I am a disabled person, a wheelchair user. For a visual description, I am a young professional with, I guess, kind of medium length, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, dark brown hair, wearing dark pants, a floral green top, and a off-white blazer. My pronouns are she, her. As you have a friend with me, if you're able to see him, he's on the floor here. His name is Luca. He's a service dog in training, but he's usually a good boy, so hopefully he doesn't make any disturbances. So just a part of like my background, why I'm doing this presentation. I really enjoy helping people understand how to view accessible documents, especially things around accessible PowerPoint presentations. I know a lot of us do PowerPoint presentations for our work, and I think there's a lot of easy ways to make it more accessible. So I'm hoping to show you that today. I'm also on the Department of Health document accessibility work group, so I've been able to learn a lot of these different tips and tricks through that work group as well. So for our agenda, we will talk about just briefly what is accessibility, design and layout, colors and contrast, alternative text, reading order, and then the accessibility checkers. So this presentation is in two parts. You'll see I have it on PowerPoint Live. So for those of you online, you can go forward or backward, whatever you want. But once this presentation is done, I do have tryout slides. So I'll actually show you how to do some of these things. And that won't be PowerPoint Live. That will just be a shared screen, because in PowerPoint Live, you won't be able to see what I'm trying to show you. So we'll do questions in two parts. So after this, I'll pause, ask for questions, comments, if you have anything. And then the tryout, you can just raise your hand, whatever. You can interrupt me as we go. Okay. So this is kind of just touching on what accessibility is. Accessibility is essential for some and useful for all. So you might be familiar with the curb cut effect. The curb cut was designed for people with different types of mobility devices like wheelchairs or walkers to be able to access sidewalks. But what ended up happening is that this ended up being useful for lots of different people. As you can see in this picture, there's an individual with a wheelchair, people with strollers, bikes, dolly, and the image says that when we design for disabilities, we make things better for everyone. So the way that this translates into our PowerPoints is that we want to make it accessible for as many people as possible. So when we make it accessible for people with different types of disabilities or different types of needs, we end up making it better for everyone trying to access that content. So these are just some things to remember before you do your presentation. So there's the meeting accessibility link through AHS that can be really helpful just to understand what you might need to do. But there's a difference between accessibility and accommodation. So accessibility is what you're trying to meet. That's the goal beforehand. So you're trying to put these things in place so hopefully it's accessible for people. Accommodations is something that someone might individually request, and then you're trying to meet that. So for instance, someone might request an interpreter. That's an accommodation. Or hopefully you can share out your slides beforehand, but if whatever reason you can't and someone requests that, that would be an accommodation. So if possible, definitely share out your slides and notes ahead of time so people can look it over and already come in with an understanding of what's going to be talked about. You can also create a handout through PowerPoint. I can definitely show you how to do that if that's something you want to see. Use PowerPoint Live whenever possible. That way people can actively click on links. They can go forward and backward. One thing with PowerPoint Live, I will just let you know, is that it can get wonky when you have external participants. I find that So I help coordinate the Medical Reserve Corps, which are pretty much all external participants. And I can't use PowerPoint Live for them just because they can't see the slides for whatever reason. I don't know why that is. So if you do have external participants, you can try it, ask them if they can see it, but you might have to just do a typical share screen. Let's see. Ensure that the dial-in number meeting link is included in the invitation. That's pretty simple. That happens usually automatically if you include a Teams invite. And then let participants know how to access the meeting or event with alternative means like the keyboard shortcuts or voice assistants. And I added some links that help kind of describe some of that. I don't really expect people to necessarily have that information on hand and be able to walk people through that. So you could always just, if it's a Teams meeting, you could share these types of links. If it's a Zoom meeting, you could probably find similar links for Zoom. And then some things to remember during your presentation. So just be mindful of the background that you're using. Some people really like the backgrounds that blink or move around. Just be mindful of those. Those might be a bit distracting, especially if you're the presenter. You might want to choose maybe just a blur background. It is important not to blur the background of interpreters or can't really blur their background, I don't think, but ask them not to blur it because then it can mess up the sign language. It can kind of get blurred within the background. Mute all of the participants other than the presenter. That way you don't have other noises going on or ask people to mute themselves. Turning on live captions is important as well. Turning on your camera if you're speaking is really great so people can, if people read lips, they can see that, and also it just helps engage people. Talk slowly, clearly, and when possible in plain language. We do advise trying to stay away from things like acronyms or technical language, but it ultimately depends on your audience. So if your audience are technical people, then you might be using technical language and acronyms because that's the language they speak, and that's fine. Do a visual description of yourself, kind of like I did. Calling out the slide numbers. That one is advised. It's very hard to do. You might have noticed some people doing presentations before who have forgotten. I almost always forget. So we are on slide 5. But if possible, do that. I struggle with that one myself. Describing visuals on the slide. So that would be like images, charts, smart art, anything like that. Anything you're not really reading or pointing to, you really want to describe. And then be mindful of mouse movement. So if you're trying to share your screen and you're looking at a document, for instance, some people I have noticed, I think they might be nervous or something and they move their mouse around constantly. It's super distracting, so just be mindful of that. Some people are also mindful of obviously scrolling, so they'll just be like, I'm gonna scroll down. You might want to close your eyes or look away. That's totally fine. That's great to do as well. So as I kind of mentioned, accessible presentations start with accessible content. So this is slide 6. So using plain language, we kind of talked about that. It's just important so people understand what it is you're trying to present on, keeping acronyms to a minimum. If you attend other conferences, you might notice there's so many acronyms and you're trying to keep up with it and it's really hard. So even just in your other presentations, whether it's for a conference or not, just trying to really stick to that plain language. Tailoring your content to your audience, we talked about that, avoiding jargon and acronyms. Organize your information so it makes sense, the flow makes sense. Use visuals that are easier to understand for more people. So using things like images that make sense for that slide. And avoiding things like text over images or images that are moving around and stuff like that. Keeping tables and charts simple, don't merge or split cells, but just making sure that those tables and charts are easy to read and have like information that's easy to follow. Okay, so for design and layout, you want to start with a template. So your organization, department, division, whoever might have slides that are already created with accessibility in mind. I would recommend using those. If you don't have that, the Chief Marketing Office also has templates that some people were using throughout the presentations yesterday. I'm sure that some might be using them today. You can also use those. Those have colors that are already within contrast and already have things set up for accessibility. So it's taking the work out of your end. You can insert pages via new slide. That's generally the easiest way to do it. That way, again, it's the accessibility components are already in there. You're not having to start from scratch and then going in and trying to arrange all the accessibility components. Follow the AHS minimum accessibility requirements. That includes descriptive links. So a descriptive link is exactly what the minimum accessibility requirements link is versus www. Whatever the link is. So you want to make sure that it's describing where the person is going and not the like kind of URL. And then for presentations, you want fonts that are sans serif and 24 point or more, ideally. So sans serif, within the Department of Health, we use Franklin Gothic, I think is what it's called. There's lots of different fonts that are sans serif. Your department might have a specific font that they want you to use. Definitely use that. That's the base. Keep white space so you can absolutely split things up onto more than one slide. You don't have to put everything onto one slide. So white space is really helpful for people just to keep track of what you're trying to say. Avoid backgrounds. So you want to avoid backgrounds that have like patterns or images or anything like that. Just really keep in mind the contrast of the font to the background, keeping the backgrounds like a plain solid color. And then if you are using transitions and animations, keep it simple. Fewer movements the better. Stopping after 5 seconds is ideal. Some people like Canva, which is, I love Canva. It's amazing. You can absolutely use Canva for slides. However, they are not accessible, so it creates a lot of work for you on the back end. So when you download the slides, you can download it as a PowerPoint, and then you would have to go ahead and do all the accessibility components afterwards. So just be mindful of using Canva. You absolutely can, but it does create more work for you. Okay, so for color, you can definitely add visuals to enhance your points, break up text. I love having pictures. I think it helps convey what you're trying to say, and it does break up the text, so it's not so much on one page. But make sure your text and data can be understood without color as well. So if you have things like charts, smart art, tables, anything like that, to make sure that if there's color associated, that there's also another way for them to get that same information. So if you're trying to say all of this red text means this and this green text means this other thing, make sure like the color isn't the only way that you are trying to convey information. Choose color combinations with high contrast. I put this link here at the bottom. That's like the best color contrast link. It's amazing. WebAIM. So definitely just go there. You can put in your 2 different colors, foreground and background, and it'll tell you if it approves or not. You want to be making sure that you are hitting AA at the minimum. So AAA is amazing if you get it, great. But at least do AA. And it'll just pass or fail you, and then you can play around with the colors. So you can either put in like the color code, or you can use the eyedropper to get the color. So for alt text, this is for a description. So this is something you would use if you have an image and you need to add some sort of description for that image. Alt text is not necessary if you have images that are decorative. So for instance, this image on the bottom is of a girl outside. She's drinking some water. It's sunny. There's some trees behind her. If this image was of importance to your slide and it helped convey information, you could do some simple alt text like a child outside in the sun, in the hot sun drinking water. But this image also, if it's in your presentation, just to be in there, it's decorative. It's not really adding to your presentation. You can just mark it as decorative, and that way the screen reader will just skip over the image. You do need to add alt text to any like visual elements. So that includes images, charts, tables, videos, and smart art. Screen readers don't read smart art. So just be mindful of the smart art that you are using and make sure that you're adding alt text. You do want the alt text to be simple. So 1, 2, 3 lines. You can also, if there's a lot of information within that chart, smart art, whatever that you're trying to convey, you could add more information either maybe at the bottom of the slide or in the notes section. And then just that way it's keeping the alt text simple. If it's an image, you don't need to say image of, because the screen reader will already say that it's a visual, that it's an image. So you just need to describe what the image is. And I'll kind of show you some ideas when we get into the tryout section. Okay. And then there's reading order. So this is how the screen reader is reading your slides. By default, the title is read first. You do want to check that though if you are, sometimes people like accidentally delete the title section, or you're starting from like a blank slide and you insert what you think is going to be a title. You have to mark that as a title. Every slide should have a unique title. So if you have similar content on 2 different slides, you could say slide 1 continued, or whatever the title is continued. You just want it to be different from the previous slide or different from the other slides. And then the objects are read in the order they are placed on the slide. So it's important to check the reading order, because when you're designing a slide, sometimes you're designing it differently than the way you would want it to be read. Okay, the other thing about reading order that is important, that you're using the accessibility checker, if you confirm that the reading order is correct, it doesn't necessarily mark it as correct. So you might still be getting errors. That's fine. If you've already gone through the reading order, you've checked it, and you're still getting errors, you can ignore those errors. It just means that the accessibility checker isn't picking up that you confirm that the reading order is correct. And then using the accessibility checker, this is probably the easiest way to go through your slides and at least initially check for accessibility. There are some things that you might have to do outside of the accessibility checker, but I would definitely recommend starting here. And there's multiple ways that you can access this. And I will show you that when we get over to the tryout slides. And then the last couple of slides, I just have some resources that might be helpful to you, and also a session evaluation and attendance. I have the same slide at the end of the tryout slides as well, so don't worry about finding this at the moment. Any questions or comments so far?
The question you may answer this, but about screen readers and grouping objects with say text in in a shape. Mm-hmm. If you group those, how might a screen reader read through that as part of that, like a visual, or should you just make it a single picture?
Yeah, make it a single picture. Yeah,
image picture, and then describe it in alt text.
Yeah, so a good example of that is also smart art. So when you design smart art, you'll see it in like individual components, but for the alt text, you'll want to do an alt text for the entire smart art. So you don't need to do alt text for each element. It's just the full thing. Yeah. Yeah.
And then if I can just add, and sometimes you then want to mark everything else as decorative. So then it only reads your alt text for the smarter and doesn't try to read your individual circles.
It doesn't say circle. Yep, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
Can you give an example of what smart art is? I don't.
Yeah, so I have a pretty basic one in the tryout slides, but Smart Art is a feature within PowerPoint. So if you do, so you put together a slide and then you go to the design feature, it'll spit out like a bunch of different options for design it's on the right side of your screen. Oftentimes it'll put things into Smart Art. It'll have a lot of options on Smart Art. So like a good example are lists. It'll start putting lists into Smart Art, which is fine. People use that and it's okay. It's just that you have to just understand the way that a screen reader would interact with that Smart Art and just be prepared to either, you have to do alt text, but then you would also want that same information, like either in the notes section or somewhere else on the slide. So oftentimes, once people understand that, they kind of go away from Smart Art just because it's duplicative. You're duplicating information. So, yeah. Yeah.
For sharing slides ahead of time, is there a difference in terms of accessibility if you're sharing it as a PowerPoint file versus as a PDF?
Yes. So it's best to share it as a PowerPoint file. The reason also is because, so a lot of the things within the accessible PowerPoint may not get transferred over into a PDF. The other reason is because a lot of staff don't have access to paid Adobe that would be able to help with transferring things over. And also, if you have paid Adobe and you kind of understand how to use the accessibility features, you could do things on the back end to make sure that those components are moved over. But for ease for you and for the participants, I would definitely just send it as a PowerPoint file.
Just to follow up with that, because I've had people not have access to PowerPoint. So how do you manage the accessibility for just not being able to open it versus, what I mean? Is there a way to make a PDF more friendly if that's all that's available? Because everyone can open a PDF and some people won't have access on their PowerPoint.
I mean, PowerPoint is a free app that anyone can download. So I think that's, it's hard to know what an alternative would be. I mean, that sounds like it would be an accommodation. If they don't have a PowerPoint, then give it to them in another option.
Yeah.
Or something else.
I would probably ask that person individually what they prefer. So that's something you can always include in, in the invite or something, whatever you're using to send that information out. If you require an accommodation, contact whoever, and then that way they can reach out to you directly and hopefully they can give you some, I've received it in the past this way and this works well for me. Yeah.
Is there a lot of intersection between PowerPoint and like Google Slides? Just curious, in your experience.
No. Yeah.
I just want to call it, so Danielle online said you can make PDFs accessible. I had to do that for federal reports for years. It was just time consuming, but Adobe has good tools that mimic these tools.
Yeah, you absolutely can, but it's a lot easier to do when you have the paid Adobe. You have more features, like when you go to want to convert the PowerPoint to a PDF, it's a lot easier. You have more features within the paid Adobe, but most, at least in the health department, I can't speak to the other. In the health department, most staff don't have access to that. It's the free Adobe version, and that makes it really difficult because you really can't go ahead and access those features. But if you have a paid Adobe account and you are able to do that, by all means, go for it. But for people who don't, I would definitely recommend sticking with the PowerPoint file.
Another question, if you are sharing as a PowerPoint file and you want to make sure people don't accidentally edit, or if you lock elements on a slide, does that affect a screen reader or the ability to access the information? I can look.
I don't
it up,
know.
too, if you don't.
Sorry, I keep looking at Kristen because we're both on the document accessibility, or so like if I can't answer it, maybe she can. But I don't know. I don't know that question. I would probably opt to send people a copy of the presentation. So you can, attach it as a file instead of giving people like access permissions
Right.
through share.
Mhm.
So that's what I would do. That way people can download it for themselves. They can't edit your original document.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sure, if you already went over it, sorry if you did. For state of Vermont logo, would that need an alt text, particularly if it's on multiple pages due to the slideshows like template?
Yeah, so it depends on how the template is set up. If the logo is on the template when you download the template, hopefully whoever designed that template has already put in the accessibility features for that logo, either doing alt text or marking it as decorative or whatever they decided to do. If that isn't the case, then yes, you would probably want to do alt text, or I mean, it's really up to you. If you wanted to do alt text or decorative, you have to kind of think about like what makes sense to the screen reader. If you have it on the first slide, like the title slide, you mark that as alt text, and then you have it on all of the other slides. Like, do you need it to be alt text for all of the slides? It gets repetitive, so it just depends. But hopefully, if you're using a template, they've thought about that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hopefully, you can always check. And sometimes that is a feature that's locked. If you're using a template and the logo is on it, sometimes they'll lock that feature. So yeah, you can't do anything with it. Then you're good to go. Any other questions or comments? Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. And then I'm going to share my screen. So feel free to ask questions as they come up with this. Yeah, okay, you can see what I'm doing. So I'm going to try out slides. And you might notice this image here on the title screen. It's just of a person in a meeting. And so if you want, well, actually, let me back up. Let me show you how to get to the accessibility checker first. That's what I was going to do. So there's multiple ways of getting to this. First of all, let's see. There's like 3 different ways. So I'm trying to think which one to show you first. There's review up at the top ribbon. You can go to review and then check accessibility. So if you click on it, you'll see different options. So if you're like, I just want to do alt text, I don't care about the other stuff right now, then you can just do alt text or just read order. But you can also do check accessibility and it'll go through everything. And then it'll show on the right hand what you should be going through. Just an FYI, the accessibility checker doesn't get everything. So this is like a first pass through, and then you might have to go and look at other things. The other option is at the bottom of your screen, you might see accessibility investigate. Investigate means there's errors. So you can click on that and it'll pop it right up. If you don't see accessibility investigate or whatever at the bottom, you would want to go to File, Options, yeah, more than Options. and then go to accessibility. And then you want to keep accessibility checker running while I work. I definitely recommend this. That way you can see at the bottom of your screen there in the left side, if you're good. If it's like good, it'll tell you that you're clear. Investigate means there's issues. So I definitely recommend clicking on that if you cannot see accessibility on the bottom there, that is why. Okay. Any questions about that? Okay, so we're gonna do alt text here. So one way to get to alt text is by right-clicking on the thing that you're trying to do alt text for, and then you can say view alt text. So I've done this presentation a few times, so it's not showing up, but if you just put in like a picture or you know, if you go into, if you do like insert pictures and do either stock images or online pictures, there usually is automatic alt text that comes with it, and oftentimes it's not helpful. So I definitely recommend checking the alt text to make sure that if there is automatic alt text, that you either change it, or if it is helpful, great, but usually it's not. So for this particular image, do you think I should add alt text to this, or do you think I should mark it as decorative? Do you think it's adding any value to my slide? No. So I would probably do mark as decorative, and that's the little box you would check here, and then it grays out all of the alt text. And that way the screen reader skips over that image. It doesn't read it. Go ahead.
Sorry, how'd you get to the, I can't see.
Sure.
Well,
So how do you access alt text?
yeah,
Sure. So if there's a few ways, but
Uh-huh.
this way is easiest for me at least. If you right click on the image
okay.
and then go down to view alt text. Yeah. Alternatively, you can get to it from review
Oh, see, okay.
and then check accessibility alt text. Okay.
Yeah,
There you go.
thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay. So I'm going to skip down here to slide number 5, actually, since we're starting with alt text. So for accessibility purposes, normally I would describe this image, but if I describe it, I'm going to give you the alt text. So I'm going to wait to do that. But what do you think the alt text for this image could be? That was the automatically generated. Actually, can I press it? Any ideas of what the alt text could be for this image?
Folks representing different disabilities.
Yeah, certainly an option. It depends on what it is that is on the slide and what it is that your presentation is trying to talk about, what you're trying to convey. Obviously, there's no context in this PowerPoint for this image, but you could, let's say it's like a disability pride presentation. That's where this came from. So you could say something like a group of diverse disabled people holding signs that say, you know, chronic and ironic. Chronic and iconic. There we go. Disabled and proud, disability pride. Let's say though that this is by a particular artist, you might want to say that this is by so-and-so, cartoon, art, or whatever, or you could put it as text near the image, who it's by, maybe the year, if that's important, anything like that. So it really comes down to what it is that you're trying to convey to people. But for the purposes of this, we'll just keep it simple to say a group of diverse disabled people holding signs. Right. There. That's a good alt text. It's just kind of very simple. Go ahead.
So in the context of a presentation, would you also add a caption to this, or would you just describe it verbally during the presentation?
Yeah, that's a good question. It depends. So I would probably describe this, but if you know that you're not, you could add a caption, or you can add like a further description in the notes section. But I would go ahead and describe this, but you can do both. I mean, it depends on what you want to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like if you have shared the slides ahead of time and the alt text was there, I think I'm just like noticing things that I might be assuming, like, oh, I've offered these things, but maybe the alt text didn't come through. Or, yeah, I'm just wondering if someone's looking at the slides ahead of time to familiarize themselves. If that's like caption worthy, or if the alt text does the work in that case.
Yeah, so this is Kristen, I'm the moderator and also on the accessibility work group with Jackie. I think sometimes they serve different purposes. It's my understanding that captions are particularly helpful for people who are deafblind, who don't necessarily get the alt text because they wouldn't listen to a screen reader. So it's sort of a different thing. It's my understanding though, and hopefully I'm not saying this wrong, at the WCAG is, I can't remember what it stands for, but it sets the rules around what you need to do for accessibility. Captions are like extra. So alt text is required. So that's something just to be aware of. So alt text is required, new alt text. Caption is great if it makes sense for what you're doing. And also it could be an accommodation for someone who's deafblind.
But if you're thinking about like a video that you're trying to share, it is important to try your best to include a video that has captions included. You can also, if you are including a video, you can also include like a video description, like what is the video? Sometimes people will ask for like kind of additional descriptions of like going through the video, what's happening in the video. But it kind of depends on what you're trying to do. But it is important to try to include video descriptions. I will say that the health department has a lot of videos that do not have captions, which is difficult. So like some of our older videos don't have captions. So I was doing a cold weather presentation, like preparedness presentation for our Mount Reserve Corps, and we have a video on carbon monoxide poisoning from the health department that's on YouTube, but it does not have captions. So it's a bit challenging if you're trying to use like videos from either your organization or from other state departments, and some of them don't have captions. And so you have to think about like, do I want to use this video or should I try to find a different video? So just be mindful about that. We did end up using it and had to kind of work around it. But ideally, if you can find a video with captions, that's great.
So this is Kristen again. I just want to add on captions for images being primarily for deafblind folks. That's different from video captions. So video captions, are for people who can't hear and are reading instead. Most YouTube does have automatic captions, but you shouldn't rely on that because they're not very accurate. So ideally, you would you can do automated captions through Stream or something if you're making a video, and then edit them and upload those to YouTube so they use your corrected caption instead of.
Okay, so I'm going to show you this is SmartArt. This is a very simple SmartArt. SmartArt gets very complicated very quickly, but I was struggling to figure out what to put in here. So this is what I found. So This is something you would need alt text for. So I have clicked on the entire Smart Art, so instead of doing the individual sections, you just need the whole thing. And then you would do alt text for this entire component. So just kind of, this is, again, it has no context in this slide, so it's a little bit difficult to think about the alt text you put on this Smart Art. But it is exactly what it says, key areas affected by systemic issues, and then it goes down the list. So anyone having thoughts on alt text for this Smart Art?
Would the screen reader read the smart art list, or is that just an assumption?
No, it wouldn't. So that's why we have to add alt text. It would read the first part because that's not part of the alt text. That's a different, this is separate. I've added this separately as a different like text box. But if this title, key areas affected by systemic issues, was part of the Smart Art, it would not read that. So, yes.
Would it be like, I mean, would you say an image of list smart art that includes from top to bottom, education, employment, healthcare, criminal justice system?
Yeah, I think that's a good one. You don't have to say image of.
Oh, yeah,
You just
right,
say, yeah, you could kind of skip that first part, and then also I would probably skip the Smart Art part and just say list of from top to bottom, because it's going to read key areas affected by systemic issues. So you don't need to say that again. So you could just say, yeah, list top to bottom, education, employment, healthcare, criminal justice system.
Kara, online has suggested key areas affected by systemic issues. And they add numbers. So one, the education, two, the employment, criminal care, or criminal justice system.
Yep. That is certainly another option. Just know that the screen reader will read that heading twice. So it's just being mindful of that, and what you think would be best with the flow and what would make sense. Go ahead.
Is it valuable to say list in a diagram? Like, would they wonder why it's in the alt text instead of reading the list, or can you just say top to bottom list of?
I think you can just say the list, unless if the diagram is of relevance.
Right, okay.
So sometimes like people, I noticed, I think you had some Smart Art in your presentation that had like a circle. So that would be of relevance.
Say like in a circle.
Yeah, and like kind of what's going on in the circle. It's flowing, like, you know what I mean? That kind of thing. That's relevant. This is just really basic. That doesn't need to be in Smart Art, but I put it in Smart Art so you can see it. This is just a basic list. The actual elements within the Smart Art have no meaning. The order, like the structure of this has no meaning. Yes.
I'm curious if there's a way that, well, I guess you could just download the screen reader. I'm almost curious like what the user experience is when creating alt text and, you know, structuring this to meet accessibility requirements. A part of me worries that I might make it sound choppy and kind of, you know, that there wouldn't necessarily be a flow, especially if things aren't aligned, or in other words, I'm saying like, I'm not even sure like what it would sound like because I've never used a screen reader before.
Yeah.
What would you say in order to sort of test out that user experience? Like, how can we go about doing it?
That's a great question. So there's a couple of different things. So you might be familiar with this, you might not be. NVDA is a program. Yeah, correct. It is free. You would have to put in a ticket to be able to get it. They would probably ask you if you need the free or paid version. Just go with the free version. You get everything you need with that. And then it gets downloaded onto your computer. And you can actually test things out that way. That's probably the best way to go about it. Yeah.
What was the acronym you said?
NVDA. Yeah.
I think one of the sessions, probably already knows, there's a session that got switched, so there's a screen reader, demonstration. Yeah,
Yeah,
after this.
that's great. And if you're ever wanting some additional like technical assistance with using that and accessing it, first of all, your department might have contacts, but if they don't, there's also the tryout center downstairs it's through Dale. And they can help walk you through, you can schedule some time with them and they can help you understand how to use a platform like NVDA. There's other screen readers that you would pay for, but for state employees, I definitely recommend that one. That way you can actually hear what it sounds like. And you can do that with documents. If you're trying to make an accessible document, you can do the same thing. Or if you do have the paid Adobe and you're trying to make it accessible, it's a great tool to be able to understand what it would sound like.
Yeah. So I was just gonna say, right at 10 o'clock, it's the introduction to screen readers. So they'll have that available if you are very curious on that. They are doing an NVDA overview within that session.
Yeah, great tool.
I know we only have we're running out of time, but Sarah put Sarah put the NVDA link in the chat. And also there's a note about the screen reader demo is not set up for hybrid. But there will be a virtual opportunity April 17th for the accessibility community practice. Join the accessibility community practice.
Wonderful, perfect. Okay, anyway, I'm gonna move on here. This is reading order. So this is just kind of a random slide, as you can tell, but we have to fix the reading order. So we're going to do that. And I am going to do that by going to the bottom of my screen here, accessibility investigate. And I'm going to check reading order. And actually, this is going to give me a few slides. So if you go into check reading order, it'll pull up everything that needs to be checked. I'm going to skip over some of these because I just want to get to this slide to show you. So you would go into verify object order, and then you can click on these and see where it's going. So this is the title, and then it'll tell you like this is the flow. So this is the way it's moving right now. That makes no sense. So all you do is just drag. So number 2, I do want that one to stay. That one is not supposed to be number 3. So you can see text is text, right? And then content, that's your like images. So this one here is that image. So I'm going to drag it. Oopsies, I dropped it. It's fine. Up to there, number 3. I want that one to be number 3. And then the next one is this one. So number 5 should be number 4. And you just kind of keep going until you get the reading order that you want. Let's say that this image here, for whatever reason, is actually decorative. You can unclick it. There you go. Now it's not going to read it. Or you can click it if you're like, oh, whoops, that's not supposed to be decorative. I want it to be red. So there you go. And then you would want to make sure you add the alt text or an image description, whatever you're trying to do. All right, the last thing I wanted to show you real quick is color contrast. So do you think that this color contrast is accessible? You like it? Okay. Then yeah, it's there. It technically is probably correct, but it's not great. What about that? Is that better? No, that's really hard to see. You probably can't even read what that says. Okay, how about this one? Yeah, so a white background with black text is the best color contrast you can do. Technically, a dark background, like a black or a gray with a white text is technically correct, but it kind of does something funny with your eyes, especially like if this is the color of an entire presentation, eventually you're going to be like, what am I even looking at? So you might want to stay away from that. Definitely recommend, this is great. So if you wanted to do some interesting colors, by all means, but you should definitely check the contrast. So you would go to that website and put in your colors. So the way you can find that. So if you go into font, and then go into more colors, this is, you want that HEX, the hex, and you copy that, and then you can put it over in WebAIM as your text. And then you can do the same thing with your background. So this is just a filled in format shape here. Yeah, so this is just a filled shape. Again, go to more colors and copy that. Alternatively, you can use the eyedropper tool within WebAIM to get the color of whatever it is you're trying to test. But it'll literally tell you pass or fail. Red is fail. Green is pass, but it also says it pass or fail. Any questions about any of that?
The website is WebAIM.
WebAIM color. If you type in Google or whatever you use, color contrast checker, that should be the first one that comes up.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Not necessarily a question about the contrast here, but having it being centered just made me think about it. I've heard in some places that left is better than centered, but wondering if that's actually the case.
Yeah, so I would say it would depend on what your slide is. So if you have like a lot of text, I think for a slide like this, centered is probably fine. But if you have, I don't have one here. Okay, if you have a slide like this, I would probably do like left. And also like right can be difficult to read. But sometimes you have a slide that's like questions, comments. I usually center that just because unless you have an image as well. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so this is Kristen again, so also avoid justified. Justified is probably the worst one. Because it changes the spacing of the characters, and that can be hard for folks to read.
Yeah. And you will notice on these slides, I did not put a title. You will want to add a title. So this could be like, I don't know, accessibility test 1, and then accessibility test 2, accessibility test 3, or whatever it is that you're trying to say. Yeah. And then if you add, if you were to delete this section, let's say you were like, I don't really need that. And you're like, oh, oops, I need a title. And then you add in a text box, you will have to mark it as a title. Yeah.
Can you show us how to do it?
Sure.
All right.
No, that's okay. So let me just do a text box here. And hold on a second. And I don't want that. There we go. So let's say you did that, right? And you're like, okay, let me go check my accessibility checker. It should pop up missing slide title. So let me try to get to that one. There. So now you're like, oh, it says set as slide title. So you would click that. Sometimes, depending on what you're doing, you might have something that's taking up like your entire slide, and you have nowhere for a title to go, or for someone who's visually looking at these slides, a title isn't really needed for whatever purpose. So you could add hidden title, and that would put it up top here. But a screen reader is still going to read the title, and people can still see the title, but they would have to scroll up. So it is hidden for people with who are viewing the slides. although it is kind of still there, they just might not find it. So you have to kind of be careful with that. But either way, you would. Or set as like title. And there you go. Now it's your title.
So I was gonna ask for the QR codes, would you have to do an alt text for those?
So this person again, so what I ended up doing for the QR codes, because someone who can't necessarily see the QR codes isn't necessarily using them, so I added 3 alternative things. So I just said QR code link to evaluation in this context, but there's also the descriptive link. There's also a bit.ly link if you do want to type it in. So it gives different options for different abilities.
We only have 2 minutes left. Are there any other questions or comments in the last 2 minutes? I do hope that this was helpful. That's great. Yeah, I don't know if you have any questions about any of this, you can always contact the accessibility community practice is really great. So I definitely recommend attending those, or at least, you know, having their information and contact. But you know, if you're part of the health department, you have a document accessibility worker you can always contact. If you're part of a different department, you might have your own document people as well, or your communications department or office could probably also help. So yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.